I'm here today with Dr. Blair Masters, and we're going to be talking about health philosophy and things that we can each do to implement more of a health philosophy in our lives. So, my first question is, what even is a health philosophy?
Well, a health philosophy is a way that you approach how to stay and become healthy in your life. Like some people, I eat organic, and some people, I'm a vegetarian, and some people
Okay.
have different approaches to this. And those are great, and the ones that I just mentioned are diet related. But health is very encompassing, it has
Right.
lots of parts to it. And if you're eating extremely healthy, but you never exercise, or maybe you're eating extremely healthy, but you also, are in a situation where you go on every fad drug that comes out for weight loss or something like that. So one thing may be very good for your health, and one thing may be very detrimental to your health. This health philosophy we're going to talk about, I think, is kind of all encompassing, and it helps people make decisions to improve and keep the health that they have.
Cool. I'm really into this. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your health philosophy?
Sure, sure. We call our health philosophy the triad of health. And there are 6 things that people look at when they look at health. And these things can help you or be detrimental, either way. And everyone is here. They're in the center of the triad of health for their personal situation. And we look at the acupuncture system, which a lot of people aren't even aware of that, but it's a whole system of control and coordination that the ancient Chinese discovered and have used for centuries to improve health.
Right. It's an ancient.
Oh,
Ancient.
been around for thousands of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But especially in modern times, toxins are a real problem. In our air and our water and our food, there's chemicals around today that our bodies didn't even see 50 years ago, let alone be able to detoxify and deal with.
Yeah.
So toxins can be a real detriment to your health these days. Nutrition, huge category over here, because we all eat every day, for the most part.
And our bodies are made up of what we eat.
That's exactly right. So if you're not doing this category right and you're doing everything else right, you can forget it.
Not enough.
Yeah, no, it's just all of this isn't enough to overcome a bad diet, for sure.
Okay.
But we consider this having 5 parts. What you eat, obviously, what you drink, hormones, infections, and prescriptions.
Infections.
Yeah, we throw that into that category because it doesn't really fit anywhere else really well. But infections, again, can be kind of all-encompassing. They can bother you in many different ways, and this is kind of a convenient place for us to put that, so it's not just ignored. We want to not ignore that in the health philosophy, for sure. And then allergies, which can relate to a lot of different things, but it's its own category as well. Emotion, another huge category. We all have emotions from the day we were born and even before that, probably. But these we carry with us many times, and they really affect us. And if we can get rid of the old baggage, that's the old emotional baggage that's detrimental to our health, it can make a big, big difference in regards to how healthy you are.
And I'm sure a lot of, myself included, emotion is something that I almost consider like parallel to happiness and like good health.
Sure.
But I don't, it feels like it's almost like a separate thing.
Yes, I understand what you mean. And, it can be, but emotions can be very tied to everything else in your body. There is a research that shows the body is kind of like a big battery. We store energy, and we store energy in different parts of our body that relate to different emotions.
Wow.
And yeah, it's kind of a wild concept, but it's very interesting. But emotional health can relate to like pain in different parts of the body and that sort of thing. And we have techniques that help improve that. And these are easy kind of home techniques that you can do. Emotions for some people aren't a big issue, but for many of us, it can be a significant detriment to our health or improvement to our health, either one.
And this is emotions from any point of your life, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, you may, from 0 to 5 years old, we're all trying to kind of figure things out. How do we get by in this world? And we have to deal with our parents and our siblings, and then when you go to school, other people, other kids and teachers, authority figures. And depending on how that goes and how it's interpreted by the body, by the brain, you can basically store those emotions for future reference because, I need to remember this so I can survive later in a better way.
Right.
It's just kind of
like a muscle memory.
Kind of, but an emotional memory. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
I deal with emotion by avoiding. I deal with
Being
anger
small.
by avoiding or trying to be small or yes, that sort of thing. So emotion is a huge category as well. It really, really is.
Cool.
Structure, this has to do with the bones and the joints and the muscle and ligaments and tendons, all the stuff that kind of holds us together.
Right.
Another big category, and again, if you're not doing things to improve structure, and it's so trouble these days because our cell phones, we're so on devices all the time. It just tends to and screens kind of suck you in. They really do.
They do.
Yeah.
Totally.
So if you're not taking steps to improve structure, this can be a real issue. So all of this together, if you kind of stand back and think, okay, well, what do I do here? What do I do here? Do I make this decision? And we all make decisions all the time in our lives. But if all of this is in good shape, then you're pretty healthy. You have good function, which is what everyone wants.
Right.
We want good function. We want our body to do what we ask it to do when we ask it to do it, and we're good. Everything's good, and you're at ease. At this point, you wouldn't even think about going to the doctor. Why would I? Why would I ever seek care? Yeah, I feel like things are great. But when these things start to affect us, and structure's an easy one to understand, like, I fell off my bike when I was 6, and then I had that trampoline accident when I was 10, and then I got in a car accident when I was 16, and these things start to negatively affect your health, and simultaneously, I had this emotional event when I was 3, and I had another one when I was 10, and another one, and so on, and these things affect you as well, and then, nobody eats a perfect diet, and your diet will definitely affect your health, as well as toxins. All this can throw off your acupuncture system, and with all of this going on, you start to have dysfunction. And here's part of the problem is when people are here, a lot of times we're trained in our society to basically kind of ignore things or cover them up or not worry about them. I just ate a big meal this bothered me. Or my dad had this when he was my age.
Right.
Or this runs in the family.
There's all these reasons
or there's
that we
they
kind of
justify
keep putting it off.
Or even like, well, this bothers me, I'm going to take some kind of a medication, usually over the counter something, Advil, Tylenol, whatever.
Which could potentially be a toxin.
Possibly, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. But that my dysfunction is enough where I'm going to take some step to cover it up.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
But if they continue to do that, they haven't gotten to the cause, so this continues to get worse, and then eventually you have some kind of disease process. And even here, a lot of people are in a situation where they continue that same process of like, I'm making some excuse so I don't have to deal with this, And we have all heard there's millions of people running around in our society with diabetes and they don't even know it.
Right. Terrifying.
Or it's scary considering it's such a horrible disease. There's tons of people walking around with heart disease and they don't even know it, So, and again, they just kind of justify it in their mind, or they're in a situation where they cover it up with medication.
Right.
Of some sort. But if this continues, then eventually you're going to have some sort of pain or some sort of symptom. And this is what drives most people into their doctor's office.
Right. So we've gone through the phases of like function, no longer dysfunction. Now
Right.
we're in disease, and then suddenly we're in pain, and that alerts us. Well,
Or some
I can't
other
ignore
symptom,
this
yeah.
anymore.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. And, you know, in a situation like this, I think this brings up another problem with the healthcare system that we have in our country.
Mm-hmm.
One is we don't have a good philosophy. Nobody steps back and looks at the person holistically.
Right.
Holistically.
Mm-hmm.
So we, you know, doctors, I think, specialize way too much. They really do. So the patient, each individual person, has to think holistically about themselves.
Right. As opposed to, well, I'm just going to eat this diet that I know works for me, that my nutritionist helped me with. And that's it.
And that's it, right. We have to look at our emotional health, our structural health,
Mm-hmm.
our acupuncture health, and with the app we can do that now.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at toxins, our allergies affecting us, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, part of the problem is, and the reason we have to look holistically is the doctors aren't doing that.
Right.
And if you're in a situation where you go to most doctors with some kind of pain or dysfunction or disease, then most of the time in America, you're getting a prescription.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And most of these doctors that prescribe things kind of are trained to not pay too much attention to all the rest of this.
Mm-hmm.
If you have depression, you get a prescription. You have an allergy, you get a prescription. Your back hurts, you get a prescription. Some kind of toxin and you have skin problems or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you're getting a prescription. You know, you just don't deal with any of the rest of this because our system is kind of set up in a
Right.
way that only focuses on what medications can this patient take to help this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I don't want to just rule out medical doctors because sometimes that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Say your blood sugar's 250. Something, this is an emergency.
Okay.
Something needs to be done immediately to get that
Yeah.
lower.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you probably at that point need medication.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm having a heart attack. Well, you know, you don't want to go to your acupuncturist at that point. You should go to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that sort of thing.
And hopefully they won't just give you a pill. At the
Well, yeah,
hospital.
and you know, there's where our modern medicine is so good,
Mm-hmm.
is so good, is saving people's lives.
Right. At the brink.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. But they fall down in, hey, I want to keep you healthy or make you restore your health.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And make you like a functioning person at all times.
Which, you know, function is a huge
Spectrum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can have really, really good function or not so great function.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
yeah.
a very much a spectrum. So,
Well, this, when you were talking about these, traumas that happen that, come up and we don't address maybe, it kind of made me think about how the body in this model is like, I don't know, a record keeper of your whole life.
absolutely.
So could you talk about that a little bit more? How, these things that maybe were so traumatic that we forgot them,
Uh-huh.
or our bodies intentionally tried to forget them, but they're
Yes.
still under there. How do we address that kind of thing?
Well, and that's a great question. It really, really is. I think in so many ways we're a really great record keeper with structure.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies are,
Mm-hmm.
because I see patients all the time that we take X-rays of them, and there's a record of that automobile accident got in 15 years ago.
In their body.
On their X-rays in their body.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So and that one event probably wasn't responsible for all of what I'm seeing on the X-rays, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But same thing with nutrition. When I was in college, chiropractic college, we did dissection on patients, and we had a patient. It wasn't a patient; it was a cadaver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And her artery was like 3/4 clogged with, it was amazing looking at it. her artery was like 3/4 clogged with fat. And obviously she was elderly and that sort of thing. But that didn't just come from one greasy hamburger.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That is a record of a
Like a
bad,
tree trunk almost.
Exactly.
It's got all
Yes,
those
it
rings.
grows and grows. Yes, that's exactly right. It's a record of her less than perfect health choices that she made over a lifetime.
Yeah.
And same thing with emotion. How people act and react to situations is really a record of the accumulation of their emotions over time. If you are trained by your life, essentially, that you need to react to someone that's angry in this way, then that's your
Yeah, if you had
training
like a
comes out in
childhood that had a lot of anger, and now as an adult, you're not acknowledging that, but you're just
you're
reacting.
just always following the same script that you did previously.
Right,
Yeah,
right, okay.
yeah. Because in the past, that worked for you in some way, so your brain said, "Hey, I'm going to keep doing that because that worked."
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily work in every situation.
Yeah, and it kind of gives me a sense of like the body following the path of least resistance.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, that happens a lot. Like in America, in the world, it's way cheaper to eat badly.
Right, of course.
It's way cheaper.
Yeah.
And it tastes good too. The
All
food
these like flavor
manufacturers.
aids.
Yes, exactly. The food manufacturers are really good at making that food that's really not that healthy for you have a great long shelf life that makes them more money. Isn't very fresh but tastes spectacular. So it
Yeah.
makes it so difficult to make these kind of decisions that are pro health because it's more expensive and until you get used to it. After you get used to it, it's delicious. But until you're used to it, it may not be what you're used to, what you're accustomed to.
And your tongue, your taste buds are like, give us this old bad stuff.
What I like, yeah. And when I went back to this, I don't want to just call out medical doctors as being the only ones that aren't holistic. Like acupuncturists, there's some acupuncturists who, no matter what kind of problem you go to them with, you're getting needles poked in you.
Right.
Whereas traditional Chinese medicine focuses a lot on nutrition, and they focus some on emotion, and they focus a fair amount on structure. But not all acupuncturists are like that.
Right.
And structure, like I'm a chiropractor, but there's many chiropractors who don't do anything with anything but structure. And if you're going to those kind of people with your eyes open and
Just know that you're going
just know
in.
you're getting a structural solution.
Yeah.
I know chiropractors who they have such a strong philosophy of health, and their philosophy is basically you keep this right and everything else will be fine. So they're eating junk food all the time and drinking soda pop.
Right. Well, and maybe
But
for that
that's not
doctor,
pro-health.
like structure includes eat well, but if you're not saying it or you're not educating your patients,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
How is that? How are they supposed to know that?
Right.
I guess we all need to be educating ourselves. That's
All the time.
That's the key.
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, something else that came up that I wanted to talk to you about. So, I have had allergy problems in the past, and I, it's hard to get to the bottom of a lot of where things come from.
Allergies are very difficult
Yeah, yeah.
category.
But it seemed like some of it was influenced by my like toxins and my nutrition.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's part of this, right? Is like when you take this as a personal health philosophy, you need to be kind of checking in with yourself as to what in this is
the problem.
Yeah, and like what is overlapping.
Because it all overlaps, and this is where I think acupuncture philosophy is really great, especially the ancient, is like acupuncture relates to every single one, and allergies relate to every single one, and emotion relates to every single one. They all interconnect and interrelate.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to be holistic when you're thinking about your health.
Totally, yeah.
And, with this philosophy, if you're in a situation where, let's say your back hurts, and you take some steps first of all, medication just covers it up. We discussed that. So you might be like, okay, well, I'm going to use ice and I'm going to stretch and exercise. And then that isn't working because my problem's more severe. So I'm going to seek some help with maybe some over-the-counter painkillers.
Right.
Okay? And I'm going to continue stretching and exercising. And that's not working, so I'm going to consult a specialist here.
So you go through and see, okay, I'm knocking these out. I have a problem, and I'm...
Yeah, and maybe I'll revisit it too, but let's say I'm going to go see a chiropractor and get adjusted. And maybe that doesn't work, so then I'm going to get x-rays and see what might be missed. Okay?
Yeah.
And then that doesn't work, then I might get an MRI, and then that doesn't work, then I might consult a surgeon.
Okay.
So what you don't want, is to jump right into this most severe solution right off the bat.
Yeah.
Like my nutrition, I went to the doctor for my yearly physical and I took blood and I found out I had diabetes. Okay? So the first thing you do is you don't want to start taking injected insulin. It's too extreme. I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to start exercise. I'm going to maybe get on medication depending on how bad my A1C
like what
test
are the
is.
steps before medication or
Exactly.
anything like that?
Don't jump into this extreme treatment right off the bat.
Right.
Yeah. And I think this health philosophy, we all are inundated so often with medication commercials on television. And, if you have this, go see your doctor and he'll prescribe this for you.
Right.
And that's common, very, very common. So if you're in a situation where you have a health philosophy like this, then you're not likely to just jump into that next latest and greatest medication that comes along.
Yeah.
I have this problem.
Have this holistic view.
But what can I do that's healthier than just taking the next great medication? And by the way, usually 3 or 6 months later, you're seeing a lawyer's commercial on television saying, if you took that medication, I'll help you sue the company.
Right.
Because of all the horrible side effects of it.
Right. Well, we have to wrap up in just a second, but I want to ask one more question because I'm so curious about where this came from. Is this something you've developed over the years, or?
I didn't come up with this.
Okay.
I really didn't. Really, this is a philosophy that the ancient Chinese had when they were developing acupuncture.
Wow.
And when it started, it had acupuncture, structure, nutrition, and then there was emotion too. They didn't codify the emotional part of it as much because usually, the acupuncturist lived in your town and he knew your entire family and he knew whatever situations were going on. Right,
yeah.
Exactly. But they understood that was part of it. But with our modern society, they have expanded it. Dr. Goodhart, who was a chiropractor and applied kinesiologist in the, up till just not too long ago, the 90s, he passed away, but he kind of fleshed it out, and there were many other doctors who've kind of added to this as well.
Cool.
It's a philosophy that's developed over time, and it
many
years.
Yes,
many people have added to it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a great way for people to approach their own health and to have at least, some kind of way of imagining what could be the problem, because problems can present themselves in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
And I think that we're just learning that more and more individually, but also as a society.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings up, if something's not working, you're probably not approaching it from the direction that it needs to be approached.
Yeah.
Like I have patients who come in with back pain on a regular basis, and we treat them and help them a little bit, but it's still there. Well, we find out it's emotional. Has an emotional component that we didn't address.
Yeah.
Or we find out it's nutritional and it has
so
this
if you're
component
addressing
we
it
didn't
over
address.
here, it's never going to get fixed.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So we need to be holistic in our approach to our health individually and as a family and as a society.
Yeah.
And that's really bringing wellness to the world.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear more about your upcoming acupuncture program. We're not going to get into that today, but maybe we'll have you back on to talk about it sometime in the future.
I would love that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Blair Masters. It was really great having this
Thank
conversation
you.
with you.